Now to continuing coverage, the parents of Jordan DeMay say the time is now to take action to protect our kids, our communities, and to honor their son. It's been over 2 years since we first learned 17-year-old Marquette teen Jordan DeMay died by suicide after getting caught up in what we now know to be a sextortion scheme. Since, his parents and law enforcement have worked to not just find those responsible for the events of that evening, but to share his story. We've been following this landmark case from the beginning and will be in court on Thursday as 2 Nigerian men are sentenced for their role in the scheme that led to Jordan's death. But first, the impact of this case and a loss felt not just here in the Upper Peninsula, but across the world.
Jordan was larger than life, right? So when I think about all of this, like that his story has changed lives internationally, I think, of course you did. Of course you did. Because that's him. He's big.
Jordan's parents have shared what they've legally been able to about what happened to Jordan over 2 years ago from the beginning. For those listening, it's been a reality check. We've learned not just what sextortion is, but that it can happen to anyone, anywhere. Gone are the days of, that won't happen here in the Upper Peninsula. It won't happen in our small communities.
For law enforcement, for parents, and for kids, we just need to make them aware of what's happening, how how quickly it happens, how easily it happens. And it's not going to happen to my kid. Stuff is nonsense.
Jordan's story has changed the conversation, given other victims a space to feel heard and not alone. Jordan's story has saved lives.
He did not die in vain. And he has saved numerous lives, and his parents, for helping us get the word out and doing what they had to do. And, and hopefully it will save lives in the future. I know it will.
For the first time in the United States, the criminals who went after Jordan were tracked, charged, and extradited from Nigeria, a feat that would never have happened without the quick action and work of the Marquette County Sheriff's Office.
We were fortunate that we have some really good guys who were able to do it, and I'm so proud of what they've done.
Since sharing Jordan's story, Sheriff Zybert says he's had other families come forward, knowing what Jordan went through, realizing it was being done to them. He says this case has created a blueprint for catching these online, often undetectable predators, one they didn't have before.
I think everyone from the federal agencies to the local agencies now have a schematic way of investigating this. Save that IP address, block them, and follow up with the federal agencies.
These scams are fast-moving, ever-changing. They range from sextortion schemes to business and bank scams. The criminals prey on the vulnerable and use social media as a gateway into our homes and our personal lives.
This is the real deal. There's real people that came into my home and did this, and there's real people that are being held accountable for this. So it gives it some teeth, and I want people to understand that.
John, Jennifer, law enforcement, those in the Department of Justice, they all want people to understand the risk we take every day when we pick up our phones and computers and jump online. It's frightening, it's bigger than we realize, and it's not going anywhere.
Cell phones are wonderful, but what many parents and young people don't realize is that they're just a call or text away from criminal networks that are operating around the world. And so we have to be careful. People should not assume people are who they present themselves as.
Both Samuel and Samson Agoshi will be in Marquette Federal Court on Thursday for sentencing. In April, both men pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to sexually exploit minors. The charge carries a mandatory minimum of 15 years in prison and a maximum penalty of 30 years in prison. Tomorrow, we hear more from Jordan's parents on how they're fighting to protect other kids and keep Jordan's spirit alive.
Today, 2 brothers from Nigeria will be sentenced in Marquette Federal Court for their role in the sextortion scheme that caused the death of Marquette teen Jordan DeMay.
It marks a monumental moment for the Justice Department, for law enforcement, for all those who've worked tirelessly to track down those responsible for Jordan's death. And as TV6's Elizabeth Peterson reports, while the sentencing will provide a bit of closure, it's also sure to send a big message across the globe.
Everything has been overwhelming, and it feels like I live in this movie sometimes. Is this the reality of my life, you know, going from finding out what happened to Jordan and learning about what sextortion was. You're meeting with law enforcement and they're saying that these people did this to your child all the way in another country. It's hard to wrap my brain around sometimes. And everything happening so quickly with them getting here and being in court and then the pleas. I don't think I've had a moment to really sit and process everything.
For Jennifer, she finds comfort here at the water, a place Jordan loved.
He loved it here on the island, seeing the boats. I would always talk to him about the boats.
Nothing will ever bring Jordan back. But seeing the process unfold, finding those who took her son from her, working to protect other kids, it's her life now.
I never regret being public with it. I knew from the moment law enforcement told us what happened, the right thing to do was to share that with everybody. And it has turned into really a life-changing thing, even more for other people as well.
When Samuel and Samson Agoshi, who've pleaded guilty for their part in the sextortion ring, are sentenced, it will be justice for Jordan. But it will also be a moment with a big message to predators who continue to prey on our most vulnerable.
Jordan's case was the first Nigerian extradition in the history of the country. So it's a big deal. So our government's meeting with their government to strengthen that relationship because we want them to know, and the extortionists that are over there to know, that we have aircraft on the airfield gassed up and ready to go, so keep it up. And we're going to come for you. And that's the message that we're sending.
A message expected in court, in the action that continues in this investigation, and in the work being done through legislation, all aimed at protecting kids and holding those involved accountable, from the criminals themselves to tech companies.
It's kind of scary, it really is. There's a lot of things that are happening, and all the decisions that are made at these companies are monetary decisions, and they know about the impacts that it's having on youth specifically, and adults for that matter, but they're not making any changes because they're choosing the dollar over the children. Really is what they're doing, unfortunately.
It's change that will undoubtedly take time. The Kids Online Protection Act, a first step in legislative action, has overwhelmingly passed the U.S. Senate and is waiting to be taken to the House. Jordan D's Law, a state initiative, has received support and is waiting to go to committee. Proposals aimed at increasing education programs in schools and creating new policies to better protect minors online.
That's kind of the second phase for me, really, is moving from the awareness part, which is important, over to the change part, and kind of squeezing those two things together, because we can't have one without the other. His life was meant to be something else, and that's something that we have to kind of keep inside. And it's hard because we feel it every day.
Elizabeth Peterson will be in Marquette Federal Court this morning as both Samuel and Samson Agoshi are sentenced for their role in the sextortion scheme that led to Jordan DeMay's death. She'll have their sentences and reaction from Jordan's parents and law enforcement tonight on your TV6 evening newscasts.
We begin with new developments as two men from Nigeria are sentenced to their role in a sextortion scheme that involved more than 100 victims and led to the death of Marquette teen Jordan DeMay.
Now, today's sentencing happened in Marquette Federal Court. Our cameras were not allowed in the courtroom, but TV6's Elizabeth Peterson was there. Elizabeth, this is the culmination of an over 2-year investigation involving multiple agencies across the state, country, and overseas. It's a monumental day happening right here in the Upper Peninsula.
Cody, Grace, everyone I spoke with this afternoon pressed that point, the significance of this moment, a first in the history of the United States. Samuel and Samson Agoshi will spend the next 17.5 years in prison. Through the work of law enforcement, starting with the Marquette County Sheriff's Department to the FBI and countless others behind the scenes, the Agoshis were tracked, charged, and extradited to the United States. They pleaded guilty to posing as young women on social media, persuading teenage boys and young men to send sexually explicit photos and then blackmailing them with those images. The Agoshis detailed the way they harassed and tortured these victims until they sent money, and in Jordan's case, he sent $300, but from the pressure, ultimately died by suicide. For Jordan's family and friends who filled the courtroom today, it was justice for Jordan. And for those working to protect our most vulnerable online, it was a message. These crimes will not be tolerated. In a packed courtroom inside the Marquette Federal Courthouse, friends and family of Jordan DeMay showed their support as Samuel and Samson Agoshi were sentenced to 17.5 years in prison. Tears flowed as Jordan's parents addressed the Agoshis for the first time since their son Jordan died by suicide in 2022. Speaking first, Jennifer shared her last text from Jordan. "Mother, I love you." A text she thought was enduring, but it was his goodbye. She told Samuel, "It's not fair." John and Jessica DeMay also addressed the defendants, sharing stories of who Jordan was, a boy with a smile that would light up any room. Jessica, shaking, told the court the defendants stole their joy.
Sometimes you have to get into the details to really make sure somebody grasps what happened, what they've done, what our loss was.
Together, they shared the nightmare that was Jordan's last night, his last moments, and they listened as both men apologized. Samuel saying, "I'd like to apologize to the family of Jordan DeMay. I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart." Samson saying, "I'm sorry for what I did. I made a bad decision to make money." Their statements were brief, but the emotions of this day were heavy.
It was difficult, definitely, to hear them apologize, because really, I know that they may be remorseful and thinking that they did make some bad decisions in that evening, but their words don't bring back my son Jordan.
There is no sentence that will bring Jordan back. There is now and always will be a hole felt by those who knew and loved Jordan. But today is action in a fight to protect other kids. It's a day to recognize justice for Jordan and the path forward.
It's a great day for Jordan. It's a great day for our community. Everybody in the world really is seeing that this crime isn't going to be unnoticed. And if you're thinking you're going to hide behind the computer, hide behind an ocean, we're proving that today that that's just not the case.
Both Samuel and Samson will be deported back to Nigeria after their time in prison. The investigation into the sextortion scheme continues. 5 additional men were recently charged for their role, money laundering. All 5 were U.S. citizens. We will continue to follow this case as more details are released.
In continuing coverage, 2 Nigerian men, Samuel and Samson Agoshi, will spend the next 17.5 years in prison for their role in a sextortion scheme that led to the death of Marquette teen Jordan DeMay. We were there in Marquette Federal Court yesterday as their sentences were handed down.
It was the result of over 2 years of investigation of our local law enforcement doing it right from the beginning. And while this marks a historic moment in the United States, it's only the beginning. As TV6's Elizabeth Peterson reports, the work to protect our most vulnerable is far from over.
I want people to appreciate that this is a very real threat, that what happened to the victim in this case, to Jordan DeMay, unfortunately is not a one-off. It's something we are seeing with increasing with rapid speed.
U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Michigan, Mark Totten, says they have multiple sextortion cases in his district right now. Cases where victims have died by suicide as a result of sextortion. It's a very real threat and one that is aimed at our children. It has no borders and leaves everyone with a cell phone at risk.
I think this case has really been, perhaps more than any other, a wake-up call to America about the scope of this threat and the dangers that our kids face by the devices we put in their pockets.
It's been rare to catch these predators. They've hidden behind a tangled web of jurisdictions, red tape, and changing technology. But tracking, charging, extraditing, and convicting Samuel and Samson Agoshi has set a new precedent. And it's created a blueprint, one the Marquette County Sheriff's Department is sharing across the country.
We are going to take it on the road and let officers know what we did, what they can do, and to help their communities.
It starts with awareness, with implementing protections for our kids. It's teaching families not just what the threat is, but what to do when the threat creeps into our homes.
This is where I feel is my job, is to keep getting the message out to the kids that this may happen to you, and if it does, there's consequences and, you know, embarrassment, but it's not the end of the world, and it's not worth killing yourself. It's a matter of reaching out to a parent, a teacher, a police officer, someone, and, you know, telling them, and then we can get the ball rolling.
It's all the parents of Jordan DeMay can ask for, that the pain of losing their son, the light of their lives, to sextortion can lead to other kids, other families from ever having to be in their place.
With your help, getting our voices and sharing Jordan's story, it is making a difference. And he will never be forgotten. And every day I know his life and story is saving another life.
The investigation into the sextortion scheme that led to the death of Jordan DeMay is not over. A third defendant in Nigeria, Ezekiel Robert, has appealed his extradition to the United States. That process is still unfolding. 5 U.S. citizens have been charged with money laundering in this scheme. 1 has been arraigned and 4 others await their arraignments. We will continue to cover this case and others like it.